My name is Ken Anderson. I'm the Dean of the Business School at Gonzaga University, and I'm happy to welcome you to our first February presentation of 2021 on Mondays at noon. And we are fortunate today to have a Gonzaga alum, James Thompson, visiting with us. James has a fascinating background and some good stories to share. He is currently a managing director with Alexander Hutton over in Seattle. But we're thrilled to have him with us and happy to have all of you with us as well. Um, for those of you not on campus currently, things seem to be off to a good start. Uh, the weather is typical for Spokane in late January, early February, but things seem to be going well, and we've got things, as I said, off to a good start, and hopefully they will continue along the way. So with that, let me introduce our guest, James Thompson. James, thanks for being here today with us.
My pleasure.
Thrilled we could connect. And as I mentioned, you're a Gonzaga alum. Can you talk a little bit about your how you got to Gonzaga out of Montana, and a little bit about your GU experience?
Well, I am originally from Butte, Montana. I graduated from Gonzaga in '92. Grew up a guilty Catholic, like many of you probably. And when I told my dad I was going to go to Montana State, he said, "I'm only paying for Gonzaga." So that's how I got to Gonzaga. But I had a twin brother at the same time with me at Gonzaga. And my brother Sean was a senior when we were both freshmen. So three of us were at Gonzaga. We all went to Gonzaga in Florence. We all loved our time there, the friends that we made, and the personal growth that, upon reflection, probably we didn't live it in the real time, but upon reflection, I think it was really a special place to be.
What are some of your takeaways as far as the overall educational experience, including Florence for that matter?
I think, I'm 50 years old now, and I think that period of 18 to 22 is such a formative age. It's probably as formative as 0 to 4. When you think about the maturing a person has to step up to, coming from home, living on your own. So it was more than just the education. It was just growing up. And so I learned a lot at Gonzaga, in terms of the academics, but I think it was just as much personal growth. Gonzaga in Florence was fabulous for me because I'd never been, well, I guess I'd been out of the country once, but to live in a foreign country has its own set of challenges for a guy from Montana. And so that stretched me. And I went on to do international business. And I often thought when I was in places like Indonesia or India or China, what I would love to have been back in Italy. The food's a lot better.
There you go. There you go. Any real memories, memorable stories you can share about Florence?
Well, that was the year where the Iraqis had invaded Kuwait. So that was 1990. So it was kind of tumultuous, to be honest with you. But, Florence was fabulous for just hopping a train and seeing the world and doing crazy things that I hope my children never do. I've got plans for a couple of them to go to Gonzaga. But just a more personal growth, more friendships built, and I went to Florence recently professionally, and it was fun to walk the streets and think about my time there. So that was a special part of the Gonzaga experience, was Florence, and then my bartending at Jack and Dan's. Those were probably some of my favorite memories.
Everybody's got a Jack and Dan's experience, I think. So you came back to Gonzaga after Florence. You started the process of thinking about life after Gonzaga. Take us through that a little bit, and where you ended up right out of school.
Well, my life has always been kind of a non-traditional route because I came out of Gonzaga. I came back from Florence, buckled down, got a finance degree, got to, guys like Dean Barnes and the finance professor, I'm spacing on his name. Hickman. Hickman was awesome. I'd love to have a beer with Hickman because I just remember him vividly, and so really enjoyed those particular professors. I didn't have you, Ken, for management, but really enjoyed those professors. And so I got a degree in finance, and I came out right in the middle of a recession of 1992. And my dad had worked for a division of Burlington Northern, and he said, I want you to meet with the CFO of the Burlington Northern. And so I drove to Seattle and went down and met with the CFO, and he wanted to check me out. So if he was going to refer me to something, he wanted to make sure that, I knew how to tie a tie and shine my shoes. And so he suggested I go into banking, because in banking, I could see a lot of different industries. I didn't have to just select one. And so I interviewed in New York. Well, the other recommendation he made, and these are the kinds of people that come through your life that make, I live on Mercer Island in Seattle now, and my daughter's friend is the granddaughter of that former CFO, George Howison. I recognize his last name, and I said to her recently, I said, your grandfather made a huge impact on me in one meeting. He said, you should go into banking, and you should go and live in either New York, Chicago, or San Francisco, because those are money centers. And I had a brother who was at Deloitte, New York, and that really seemed to fit pretty well. So I went to New York, and I interviewed with big banks that are now JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs and things like that. And, other than one of their big clients say, meet with this kid, they didn't know Gonzaga. They thought it was a high school in DC. We didn't have a basketball program like you all have, which puts you on the map. And of course, the world-class academics. But anyway, then I went to Chicago, and I interviewed in Chicago with some big banks, and I didn't get a job. And but I said, you know what? When the going gets tough, the tough get going. So I had gone out to Chicago one other time to interview, and again came up short. And but that Jeff Condell at Jack and Dan said, hey, call my buddy. He's a trader at the Board of Trade. And so I call this guy up, and he goes, hey, I'm going to Wrigley tonight for a baseball game. And would you come? And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And so we sat in the bleachers. I didn't know him very well. I couldn't tell you what his name was. I never talked to him ever again. But I stood in those bleachers, and I looked around, and I thought, this is the city for me. I love this Midwestern thing. I love their love of sports. And New York, even though my brother was there, was just taxing. I just saw it as a town that would nickel and dime you to death. And so I moved, I packed up, I came back to Spokane. I packed up my car, and I said to my dad said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just going to go out there and knock on some doors. And so I didn't know anybody in Chicago really. And they'd never heard of Gonzaga. Some of the sports fans in the Midwest are pretty sophisticated. So they knew John Stockton was a Gonzaga alum. So but they were always so warm and welcoming. But you had to put yourself out there. So I end up banging on doors for about 3 or 4 months. I bartended out there to help pay my way, and I finally got a job at that one bank who said no twice. I finally didn't go away, and 90% of life is showing up, and that really set me on my path that I think has taken me to where my career is today. And I believe that that experience, when you keep getting a rejection, is one that it really formed me, and I think it's something that experience was huge for me.
And so ultimately, that led you back to the West Coast. Is that correct?
Well, not quite.
Not quite?
So after about a year and a half at that bank, I realized I was not a banker. And so I got a job offer. Like, bankers are very hierarchical. Everybody's a vice president. Lots of corporate politics. We call it ass kissing and Butte. And that wasn't for me. And so a guy calls me up and says, "Hey, there's an investment fund out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Would you have an interest in being an analyst for them?" I was an analyst. I was a credit analyst at that bank. And these investment funds love the analysts because they've been trained. I went through a training program. So I was like, Santa Fe, here I come. I'm heading back west. And I went to Santa Fe for a year. I got transferred up to Denver for about 6 months, and then I ended up back in Chicago with the same firm, all in 3 different roles that I really enjoyed. And but then it was time. I knew coming out of undergrad that I wanted to get 2 work experiences and then go back to business school. And that was just the way that it was done. And if you wanted to get into a good business school, you had good work experience. I had okay grades, and I was kind of average test scores. So I went through a couple of years of rejections on that, but I never gave up. I finally got into, I think, Vanderbilt, Texas, and University of Washington. And I wanted to live in Seattle. My brother Sean had gone to Harvard Business School and ended up back in Seattle. My other brother went to Thunderbird, ended up back in Seattle. Even though we're not from here, we've made it our home. So I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by 2 brothers. And then, of course, when that happens, your parents show up too. So they live here in Seattle as well. And so I went back to business school, studied, business school for an undergrad who has business background. It was all kind of, it was in some ways repeat, but because I had been out 5 years working, all the stuff that I was learning, I learned why I was doing that. When you go into a first job, people tell you what to do, and you're a liability for the first year and a half. And then you turn into an asset for the organization. So when I was learning it the second time, finance and accounting and marketing and operations management, things like that, I had some depth and some perspective. So business school was actually, I remember I went into my professor, Rocky Higgins, and said, "Hey, I've been doing banking and investment banking, private equity. I don't really need to take your finance 101 class." And he's like, "No, I think, because I wanted to audit it." And he's like, "No, I think you'd learn." And I'll tell you, I learned a lot, because what I'd learned was that for 5 years, people were telling me what to do, and I didn't know why. And by going through it again in study, I learned a lot more about why I was doing all those spreadsheets and all those capital asset pricing models and all that stuff. It made a lot more sense. So I finished up at University of Washington in '99. It was during the dot-com boom, and I got recruited to be went to work for a venture capital firm. And it was when it's a little bit like today in the private equity world, but on the venture capital, these are people who invest in little startup companies, and out of 10, 8 of them die, or maybe not 8, but maybe 6 of them die, and 3 of them are walking dead, and one's a big winner. and we had one called F5 Labs that ended up being F5 Networks, and that was our win. And so that was quite extraordinary for the people who had come in just prior to me coming in. So yeah, I didn't get the payday, but it was a fabulous run of 6 years in venture. But I got to the age of 34, and I said, you know, I've never actually worked for a company that made anything. So I was sitting on these boards of these companies, giving these CEOs advice. And I was thinking, they must be thinking, what is this kid? He's an MBA. What the hell does he know how to run a company? And so I got an opportunity to be the CFO of one of our portfolio companies. We had 10 investments. We sat on the board of all those investments, or maybe we had 12 or 13 or whatever. And I became the CFO of a company. I remember the new CEO comes to me and says, "Hey, will you be my CFO?" And I said, "Well, I've never done that before." And the guy said, "Well, you're smart. You'll figure it out." I said, "John, I've never even worked for a company that's made anything. And this company is a manufacturing, and it in-licensed, out-licensed. It did a whole bunch of things." And so I buckled in, and for 10 years, I was a CFO of that company. We took it public, did an IPO. We built a business in India and in China. So I was really stretched culturally, and I showed up in India the first time. I felt like for many of you guys don't get this reference, but I know Ken will, the Mr. Bond in some of the old 007 movies. It was very, very enlightening to be in a place like India, or spend a lot of time in Indonesia. It's all about drinking water. So we made water safe to drink. I don't know if that's a lab coat somebody has on there, but this was about harnessing the killing power of chlorine and bromine to make water safe to drink. And so we took that company public. As a CFO to do an IPO, it was kind of a cool thing to do. It was kind of a career making thing. But I knew that I was for 10 years. I mean, we were successful and raised a lot of capital, but I knew I wasn't a CFO. I kind of faked it to make it. But we ended up, I was CEO for 4 years, pivoted the strategy, and then sold the company, and then came back into investment banking, kind of returned to my roots in advising companies, because I had been both an investor in a company as well as been an operator. And I kind of thought that the power and the economics was all shifted toward the money, and the operator is where all the magic happens. That's where products get made, and employment is created, tax revenue is created. I mean, to run a company is a very complicated thing. To be in a company that makes things is a very complicated thing. If you think about variable equations, if you're investing in companies, that your variable equation every day is like A through D. You have the right team. Is the market right? Is your timing right? If you're running a company, you're A through double Z. And by 9 o'clock in the morning, something blew up, and whatever you thought you were going to get done that day has all changed. And so I just thought that there was a role. We help companies who, they're our clients. It's a service business. If you're looking to sell your company, we find buyers for your company. We negotiate the whole process. Or if you want to sell part of your company, maybe you've built your company and you'd like to keep running it, but you'd like to take a few chips off the table and sell a third of the business, or quarter of the business, then we do that too. Private equity firms are always looking to buy and invest in great operators, and so we do. Those are the two things that we do, and that's where I am today.
And tell us a little bit about Alexander Hutton. It's not a name that probably a lot of our students and viewers are familiar with. So maybe talk a little bit about Alexander Hutton for us.
So we're a boutique firm. We've got 7 people, and it's the oldest investment banking firm in the Pacific Northwest. Started in 1986. We've done 215 of these kinds of transactions over that time frame. I've expanded the practice. When I came on board, I said I'd do it on one condition. I want to do more in Eastern Washington, Idaho, and Montana, because I think I have a theory of off the beaten path. There's some great operators, and just closed a transaction of a Missoula, Montana-based home services business where we went out to 36 parties. We got 12 offers, and this guy put $8 million in his pocket, got the owners of the Kansas City Chiefs, the Hunt family, to back him in his growth plan. And it was just a great transaction. Cultural fit is awfully important, but having been a CEO, I can kind of understand, when you have that alternative and you think, at the end of the day, you got to have that sort of understanding of what it's like. So Alexander Hutton, we work from Seattle to Billings, Montana, to Denver, over to San Francisco. That's kind of and we're all former CEOs of companies.
Okay. So a COVID related question, and it's something that we have brought up in the university setting, and you see it in HR discussions as well. Are you seeing more or less, or maybe even different rationale for people wanting to engage you and, as you say, sell their firm, sell part of their firm? Is that ticking up because of COVID? Is it kind of steady? What's your thought on that?
Well, there's 7 million private companies in the US with owners over 55. So there's a graying of America that's happening, that just every day it just continues to grow. At the same time, pension funds, college endowments, state pension funds are all dedicating more of their retirement funds, et cetera, are dedicating more of their capital to alternatives. So this is private equity, venture capital, hedge funds, to try to close the gap of the retirees that are going to need to be paid out. So there's sort of a retirement gap. And so you've got $1.5 trillion of private equity raised in these funds that are 10-year funds, and they're supposed to go out and buy these companies. And so I stand in the middle between those market forces. And with regard to COVID, we've never been busier. We had a good year last year. I think that for industries with COVID tailwinds, like we sold Southwest Plumbing in Seattle in June. Everybody was home breaking their toilets. So that was a great business to do a transaction, because as you go through a transaction, you want momentum. And that would be a COVID tailwind. And you wouldn't believe there's the obscure investment theses that are created around obscure businesses like plumbing. There's a guy in Seattle that just buys up plumbing companies. They sound boring, but if you ever hired a plumber, they won't even walk in your front door without a $150 payment, right? So it's a wonderful business. And I like these old economy businesses. Bill and Connie Buckingham in Seattle started that business 30 years ago. She was the bookkeeper, he was the plumber, and they built it up to 60 trucks running around Seattle. Those are the kinds of entrepreneurs I like to work with. Mark Springer, the guy in Missoula, Montana, inherited the business from his dad. That year, he did $75,000 of revenue, and he topped 18 million at the end of 25 years of running that business. So COVID depends. So now businesses with COVID headwinds, I have a 15 unit chain of trampoline parks in California That's kind of a hard business to market. But that too, the strategics show up. The people who are in the trampoline park business say now is the time to buy. So we are very busy. We're going to come out of this COVID thing. It's the vaccines. You know, I couldn't have said this pre-vaccines, but with vaccines, this economy is just going to roar. And I think it's all the monetary stimulus. The politics have all calmed down. We're very optimistic, and just in January we've signed up four new clients. And again, some aging owners will say, you know, I lived through 08, 09, and 10. I don't want to, you know, then I was 60, so I hung on and I built my business. Now I'm 70, and I just want to hang it up and buy a boat and hang out in the San Juan Islands.
Talk a little bit about, you mentioned this, and you mentioned this in our call the other day. Talk about, I guess I would say, like the categories of buyers. You just mentioned like the strategy folks in the trampoline business. They see it as not. What are some other categories or labels you use for potential buyers?
Well, there's sort of there's strategic buyers, people who are in the business, and then there are financial buyers, people who want to invest because they've developed a thesis around plumbing or around you know, you name it. And so those are, and then you have hedge funds, you have family offices. You know, when you think of, I was just talking to the Ross Perot family office out of Dallas. Ross Perot ran for president back in the 80s. And he's running around looking for companies to buy. He's got a group of 5 or 6 MBA types running around looking to invest in a number of different industries. So there's $10 trillion of family office. And when you think about it, I grew up in Butte, Montana, and the Hearst family backed, so that's the family office of Randolph Hearst, backed Marcus Daly to find the largest copper discovery in the world, the richest hill on earth in Butte, Montana. So this has been going on forever. This is all just what they call private equity as opposed to taking it public. So there's no change here in terms of, those are the types of buyers.
Interesting. Who knew the trampoline business would be an opportunity, right?
You know what? For every dollar of revenue in the trampoline business, a person takes 35 cents. Now that's a great business. And there are so many, the part of my business I love the most is meeting these entrepreneurs. I met a guy who's in home restoration just 2 days ago, called me up, high school dropout. He's got a home restoration business up in Snohomish. He's doing 8 million of revenue and 3.5 million of EBITDA, which is 3.5 million of profit. Now, that's a hell of a, you know, that's a great operator for a, you know, and he wants to take it to 25. So the obscure ways in which our economy works, I see it all. I'm often reminded of the movie called Down and Out in Beverly Hills, where the guy made a fortune in hangars. You remember that?
Right. So whether you want to call them, you know, the product of experience, life lessons, etc. And you mentioned you've got at least a couple kids ready to start thinking about college, and hopefully they'll be Zags and all of that. What advice would you have for college students? Maybe start with those who are about ready to graduate come May. So those at the tail end of their experience.
Well, I think first of all, whether it's my kids in grade school or me as an adult, surround yourself with good role models. And I think Gonzaga provides the opportunity to surround yourself with people you admire and who are driven and smart and make you better at what you do. So role models have always been a huge part of my life. And so that's the first thing I would say. For the students who are just coming out, you're going to get an opportunity to have mentors along the way. And however you do that, I don't know if you, I know you all read the Wall Street Journal if you're going to the business school, but I think once a week, they always highlight somebody who's a successful business person. And then they kind of highlight who those people's board of directors are. I don't know if you know that article or not. Surround yourself with people who care about your development. And so I had 2 or 3 or 4 mentors in my life that just made a huge impact on me and took a liking to me. And one of them is still my partner today. He put me in that CFO job, was on the board, and became a very dear friend. And when I came back, I said, I'm only coming back if this guy was coming with us. And so now we're back on the journey again. So that's what I would say. And I was talking to a recent Santa Clara grad who's in investment banking. A Gonzaga grad asked me to talk to her nephew. And I think it's, it's tough when you start your job. It's nice to have a paycheck, but you might not be in the greatest cultural situation. Your boss might be a jerk, all of these things, but you kind of have to, I think you got to keep the long game in mind. My mother used to always say when I would call her and say, oh, Mom, I'm miserable out here in Chicago. And she'd say, James, keep your eyes on the prize. So defining what that prize is, maybe it's going back to business school, whatever your dreams are, or, I want to go to work for Nike. Eventually I want to get to Nike, or whatever company you want to work for, or whatever you want to do, just keep your eyes on the prize, because what you're doing right now is just one step. I think I've had 4 or 5 different parts of my journey or chapters in my book, and each one built on the next. So just keep that long game in mind. And then with regard to the mentors, always have people that will advocate for you and fight for you. I can remember, and that can be your professors. It can be your boss. It can be somebody's mom or somebody's dad. Seek out people, as you can witness here in 38 minutes, people like to talk about themselves. And so sitting down with them and saying, will you have a cup of coffee with me? I'd just like to hear your path. And if they're impressed with you and you want, they'll say, hey, you should talk to so-and-so. The fortunes that are made in our business world when somebody says, hey, I know a guy or I know a gal, you should talk to that person. So, the Gonzaga alumni is a very powerful network, and you should definitely reach out and find those mentors. But fighting for you is a really important. Ken is a great example. I can remember Ken's a fighter. I can remember being on the intramural court with Ken, where he got into a bit of a skirmish with Mark Dorn, and he wasn't going to back down. And so Ken has that sort of fighter spirit for all of you guys as students. And so he's constantly advocating for you. So find those people who will advocate for you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I remember that, in fact. I think he was guarding me on the wing and he got a little bit too close. And so I just took the ball and I slammed it off his face.
Well, that was the kind of fight you need for people who advocate for you. That's a good example.
Yeah. And for everybody listening, that was a long time ago. I don't do that sort of stuff anymore. But let me ask you this. One thing that's come up a lot in the past few months, and to the point where we're kind of giving our students this advice, and maybe it's predicated on a bad assumption that gee, during this COVID educational experience, they have more time. But we keep hearing how valuable it would be for our students to be able to articulate and specifically identify some other way they made themselves better during this crisis, right? That they didn't just sit around and play Nintendo all day or hang out on Netflix. They took some courses here, they picked up a language there. Any thoughts on that kind of that way of thinking?
Well, I think, you know, we'll look back on COVID and there's just so much loss of life. It's very sad. And there's no way of getting away from it. At the same time, I think that you got to be constantly learning and growing. And if you know, and so, I think that, Zoom, we're all zoomed out. But gosh, had this pandemic happened before we had Zoom, can you imagine how bad things would be? Or before you had Netflix or Office 365? I mean, we are so blessed to have come through this during a time where technology is our friend. And so, I volunteer for the Montana Ambassadors, which is kind of a governor's economic development board. And people are saying, oh, it's kind of Zoom fatigue. I'm like, you know what, guys, this is the way that it is. You're going to have to get on another Zoom. We got to talk about what we're doing, where we're going. And so for students we're going to get through this in the next few months. And I'm optimistic. We have 4 vaccines, and already what we have to have is confidence. There's a crisis of confidence, and we need to turn off the news and get a vaccine and get back on with our lives. But I would just say, continue to learn and grow, and don't be afraid to call an alumni and say, will you get on a Zoom call, or just talk to me on the phone. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
Scheduling, the scheduling culture is just taxing on me. Call me, and I'll always take time. And I know my peer network here in Seattle who are at my age group in Seattle, they'll always take a call. And so don't be afraid. Things don't stand still in moments of crisis. You got to just keep, it's just like the English during when the Germans were bombing, they kept calm and carried on.
Yeah. Anybody got any questions out there for James? I unleashed the chat function if you want to use that.
I have a question for Mariella Zavara. Is that right?
Zavala.
Zavala.
Yeah.
Mariella, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hi. Tell me about where are you in your education journey, and where?
I'm a professor.
Oh, you're a professor. Sorry.
I look very young. I know.
Take that as a compliment, please.
I will.
Well, what do you teach?
I teach marketing. This semester I'm teaching principles of marketing and social media marketing.
Ah, interesting. Very interesting. And what are your what are the kids in marketing are going into today? Is it product marketing, or is it more consulting? Is it the agency side? Is it creative? Where are people going?
They're really all over the place. So part of, actually, I assigned extra credit to attend these talks because it's
now I understand there's no questions. You got to Extra credit for questions.
These kinds of talks are really, really beneficial for students to hear somebody's path, somebody's experiences. Like, it's not always set in stone what you want to do at, freshman year of college. And it's really great to hear your own experiences. And right now, my social media marketing class is really exciting, especially with the recent developments in the stock market and Reddit and all that going on. It's been rather exciting.
If you can get my 16-year-old daughter off of Snapchat, I'll pay you dearly.
It's hard.
It's a good stock to own, though, I'll tell you that.
So Mariella is a first-year faculty member here at Gonzaga. So she's in her second semester, doing a wonderful job. Came to us from UC Irvine, and we're just thrilled to have her in marketing, teaching that social media stuff. So that's really, really good. I did see a question from Danielle, one of our finance professors. What trend do you see post-COVID in the M&A market?
I think it's just going to accelerate. I think it's just there are just too many companies out there that need to transition, and I think that I think there's an acceleration. I think when you buy a company as a private equity investor, you're buying it. You're coming in and saying, they knock on the door, they hire people like us, and the returns there are just extraordinary. Let's say a company is doing 10 million of revenue, 2 million of EBITDA or profit, and that business is worth 10 million, 1 times revenue or 5 times EBITDA. They go and borrow from the bank, maybe 6 million, 3x of EBITDA, 6 million, and they put their own 4 million in. And if they just have a really solid operator and they sell it and they pay down the debt, it's like a mortgage, right? Like over time, you pay down a mortgage out of the profits of the business. They can generate 20% returns without even throwing too many levers. If it's a good, solid business with repeat revenue and high gross margins and a solid operator, they can generate 20% returns. Well, you all know that a bank account pays you less than 1%. And so this is a significant way in which pension funds can generate above average total returns for their pensioners, who eventually have to get paid out as they retire. So I think this is a 20 plus year trend. So I think that's just a reality. And I would tell students who are in finance, it's a great career to see a lot of different industries, to learn a lot of different things. I encourage younger people in this business to go and have other experiences too and come back like I did, because I'm so much better informed because I actually had to do it, as opposed to just giving advice on something that I've never done before. So it's a great career path. There's lots of great finance career paths. Some people like investment management and CFA. I dabbled in that, and that was too much time in a spreadsheet. I can remember my boss saying to me, James, at one particular job in Chicago, he said, we know you can do this work. And this is sort of just everyday spreadsheet work. And he said, we know you could do this work, but look out at the floor here. You see all these guys? None of them have the ability to talk to people. They're University of Chicago sort of quant guys, and none of them have a girlfriend. So we'd like to put you into institutional sales. And I realized that it was a good tour of duty for me, but I needed to be near people. I had to be out amongst people. And that came from my Gonzaga Jesuit training. Because it was so you know, had I gone to University of Chicago, I would have gone into econometrics, and, you know, that would be one path. And Gonzaga gave me the humanities, the religion, some of the extracurricular activities that really sort of rounded me out.
Cool.
Thank you, James.
Well, James, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend it with us. Really enjoyed the conversation. Learned a lot. And hopefully we will see you regularly on campus as you're escorting your college-bound kids to Zagville.
Yes, I'll be calling on you to make sure they get in.
Absolutely.
All right.
All
Nice
right,
to meet you
James.
all. Good luck.
Take care, everybody. See you
All right.
next Monday.
See ya.